Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Icon here. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. As we hop into this one, we are back on board with SCUMP. So it's been quite a few days since we've been on board with SCUMP. We spent a couple days with Gunless, we spent a couple days with ARCITYS, and one other thing that I want to talk about real quick before we actually get into the breakdown of this map is that a lot of people have been asking for scrims from other teams. Guys, there's only so much I can do, right? I wish that I could break down stuff from Dallas or from Atlanta or from Minnesota or other top teams in the game, but they just don't stream their scrims. So I'm kind of handcuffed based on who streams and who doesn't. So that's why you get so much Chicago stuff. But even with that being said, in the last few days, we've been able to check out from the other point of view, right? Even though we've been following Chicago, we've still been able to look at Seattle and Atlanta and New York and Minnesota. So we are able to view what those other teams are doing. It's just not quite from their POVs. So last thing that I will say about this is that just a couple days ago, Clayster tweeted, he asked if people would want to see their scrims. So I think that there's some internal discussion in that organization about potentially streaming their stuff. So let's just cross our fingers and hopefully we'll be able to get some of their point of views moving forward. But with that, we are playing Domination on the map St Petrograd. We're on board with SCUMP and they are going to battle against Seattle. As of right now, they have like a 26-point lead somewhere in there, and it's rotating from P1 to P2. Now, they did get the beneficial side, right? So they did get that back bar spawn to start this map. They just weren't quite able to hold it. And you're going to see with 24 seconds left, SCUMP already decided, you know what, let's go ahead and let's just get out of here. Let's rotate back to the other side of the map and try to get set up for P3. He is watching this right-hand side, and it looks like his teammates are doing a decent job of holding down mid-map, the right-hand side. Unfortunately, he dies there. But with that 20-second head start or so, Chicago should be able to get set up. They should be able to lock down both the left, the mid, and the right-hand side of the map, but we'll see how this progresses. Now, one thing that I do want to talk about is that as SCUMP misses the jump up right there, one thing that I'll point out real quick as we're looking at this is that Chicago has nobody watching the P1 side of the map. So I don't want to kind of give away what happens because I have already seen this scrim, but if you're looking at SCUMP, so right now he is focused, he's P5, right? And he's looking towards mid-map, he's looking this way. So if you look at the mini-map in the top left-hand corner of the screen, you can see all of these green arrows are on this side of the map. So everybody that's on his team is watching this side of the map. So one thing that a lot of teams are doing is to escape P2, where you have this back spawn, you could run through min-map, right? But there's going to be a bunch of people watching you from min-map. Or you could go Water's Edge, but again, there's going to be a bunch of people watching this area of the map. Something that a lot of teams don't really think about is you could sneak through P1, go top apps and come down. You could just go through Big Arch and just come down also. So as I'm watching this, the thing that I'm really noticing is as I'm looking at those green arrows, I don't see anybody watching the left-hand side of the map. So let me go ahead and get rid of all this so there's no marks on the screen. But as SCUMP comes up, look where he spawns. He spawns over by P1, which essentially what that tells him is that the enemy team, so Seattle was able to push through over by Water's Edge, right? The only reason why he would spawn on that P1 side of the map is if the enemy pushed through the opposite side of the map. Now, as he comes up here, you can see that they did get pushed through, but this isn't all bad because as we move forward here, as it goes back to P4, essentially in my point of view, in my coaching philosophy, I guess, for this map, from P4 to P5 to P1 to P2, that whole time you want to be on the right-hand side of the map. And I'll talk about why in each of those as we go throughout the next 4 hard points, but you do want to be holding down that back P4 spawn. So even though they're in or they've got like a 20-point lead or so, you want to hold down this right-hand side. And something that they're not really watching, you could just see that 2 people went outside. We'll see ARCITYS was able to get 1. It does look like they were able to lock down those 2 that were flanking the right-hand side of the map. And that's something that I know it's a little bit of a hard flank, but if there's a time to do it, now is the time to do it. Let me go ahead and just stop this again. I know, sorry, but please stick with me. I want to make sure nobody misses stuff like this. If you're Seattle, you had control of P3. Let's talk about ways that you could get this flipped and get into P4. Again, you could run mid-map. You could run through P5 to Blue Courtyard. All of that is great. Or if you were watching kind of at the beginning there was only one person watching that right-hand side of the map. So if you could flank out by Water's Edge and get behind P2. And if you're able to do that, even though Chicago is spawning here, if you're able to get that flipped, now all of a sudden you could take over P4 and that back spawn, and you could have control of the next few hills if you're able to go on that long flank. So for P4, it's probably not best to make that long flank, but if you're talking about the end game, especially if you're on the first set of rotations, that might be something that you're looking to take advantage of. Another thing that I'll point out real quick is that while Chicago has been looking so much mid-map in that right-hand side of the right-hand side flank and stuff like that, they didn't really get all of those points inside of P4, even though they were set up for it, and they had about a 25-point lead as it entered P4. When this is over, it's basically a tie ball game, and they don't have spawns moving forward. So that was a fantastic job. That was just a really nice job of Seattle of getting inside of P4 and being scrappy. And right now, if you're Chicago, you're entering P4. This is not the way that you want to be approaching it from. And the main reason is that, no, you're not set up for P1 or P2, but as SCUMP came in and got that two-piece, so as SCUMP went through, so he spawned mid-map, he entered P5, and when he turned this way and got the two-piece on this side of P5, the thing that ended up happening is the reason why I don't like coming from mid-map is because Seattle very easily could have had somebody in L over here. And if SCUMP comes through and he doesn't check his left, he's just trying to get those kills on his right, he could have been shot in the back, and that would have been all for none, right? So it's just a little bit more secure to be coming from this P4 side of the map, not only because it sets you up for the future hills in the game, but also because it's a little bit easier to defend P5. So with this, I want to talk about this strategy also. So you see SCUMP right now. There's also somebody else. I can't tell exactly who it is. I haven't seen anything in kill feed, but right now SCUMP is pushing out the opposite side of the map, right? So we just talked about how as this rotates from P5 to P1, and so also after that, we're talking about P2, you want to have this right-hand side of the map, right? You want to lock down this spawn. It's just easier to get the majority of the points in P1 and P2. Well, if you were following the arrows, you saw a lot of those green arrows push back through and try to get this back P4 spawn. Great. But what I'm also seeing teams do, and essentially it's just Chicago. Chicago is the only team that I've seen do this. But when they leave P5, they're sending a couple resources over here. And what they're trying to do, what it appears they're trying to do, is they're trying to pinch P1. So let's just say, let me go ahead and let me get rid of all this so it's not all cluttered. Let's say Seattle was spawning here. They sent a couple up top. They sent a couple into P1. And where are they going to be looking? They know Chicago's spawning this way, so they're going to be looking that way. Well, essentially, Chicago is sending people behind them, and they're trying to pinch. So as Chicago got this back P4 spawn, and they're pushing inside of P1, if they can have somebody come from the opposite side and pinch, then they can get control of P1 without losing control of those back bar spawns. Now, the reason why I don't like this is, let's say that there are 3 Chicago arrows that are back here and they're pushing inside of P1. I've seen this happen no longer than a week ago. Well, if SCUMP's on this route and Seattle's able to push through because they are trying to flip and they get kills here and they get control of these spawns because there's not very many resources back there for Chicago anymore, what's left? The only place that's left to put Chicago is either mid-map or kind of this back spawn over here. So if those that have rotated to P4 die, then the only place that's left for Chicago to go is the opposite side of the map, and now you're spawned out as it rotates from P1 to P2. That's why I don't really like this play. I know what they're trying to do, but for me, it's just a little bit of a risk because the most important thing, bar none, absolute most important thing is to set up spawns for P2. You can talk about getting in P1 and contesting and all of that, but if you're not set up for P2, then now all of a sudden essentially you stand to lose more points inside of P2 by not being set up than you do from being able to execute that pinch. Hopefully that makes sense, but get the spawns for P2 and then worry about the time that's inside of P1. Now, the other thing that I really love about scrims and being able to present this stuff to you guys is that we're allowed to listen in, right? We get the benefit of being able to hear their team comms and we can hear exactly what they're talking about strategy-wise. So with that, I'll still chime in where I feel like things are important, but I do want you to get a little bit of an idea of what they're talking about. So with that, let's go ahead, let's turn up the game sound and let's listen in.
Go. I have real back bar.
Top blue, Jerry. Top blue, Jerry.
Bar.
Yeah. Just spot out blood blue, guys.
We spawn back bar.
Just cross river.
Okay, no,
I'll also point out that as that was going from P4 to P5 on the last set of rotations, that was a tie ball game, right? So Chicago did a fantastic job of capturing time inside of P5, getting time inside of P1 on the second set of rotations, and now they're set up inside of P2. This has gone from a tie ball game to a 100-point lead in essentially the matter of 2.5 hills.
River the whole time, guys. River the whole time. He's going front door.
I'm getting out new. I spawned front bar.
I made it front and back. They spawned the back. They spawned the back.
Okay, did they? I'm not going near that. I'm cutting off front bar. Cutting off front bar.
This time. Out your hot.
Now, this is the strategy that we saw earlier, right? This is exactly what we saw. So it ended up getting flipped, right? So Seattle was able to push through. They were able to obtain this back bar spawn over here. And we just talked about how as it rotates to P2 to P3, that these routes, as Seattle's about to flank out, are super contested mid-map. This is an area where a lot of fighting goes down. So what teams will do is they'll sneak people through P1 and they'll get through on this left-hand side of the map. That's exactly where you see Scump right now, is he's just holding down this left-hand side, not allowing anybody to get through. Really smart, really heady play here from Scump.
I have front bar and blue van cut. They can't get through like mid-tracks at all.
Make sure we're holding river restaurant, guys.
What are you doing up there?
You guys play push up front.
Blue van Damon dead.
I'll back up for Tara.
I got it. Just make sure
Top
they
bar.
don't get by middle.
Top bar, Sam.
Top bar, I'm gonna die. Yep.
It's fine. They can't get through at all.
He's pit tracks.
Someone get top rest.
I'll spawn him back, yeah.
So even though Octane was able to get a two-piece there from top bar, did that help them? No. All it really did is it just gave Seattle a little bit of leeway as they approach mid-map.
Oh my no!
See elbow?
Another one there afterwards. Yeah, good job.
Left. I hear back, elbow.
Nice nade from Scump there. And if we're getting caught up on the actual strategy, there's 18 seconds left that they need to win, and there's 30 seconds left on the current hardpoint. So as long as they hold down the next 10 seconds or so, Chicago can absolutely win off of this hardpoint here.
Right now. He's pushing gate.
Okay.
Team killing. Another one there, gate.
Come on. He's weak, backdoor.
What the fuck?
That was a really good map, guys.
And with that, that's a 250 to 120 victory. And the thing that I want to point out, I do want to wait for the scoreboard to come up here. But remember, when they left P4 on that first set of the rotations, it was a tie ball game. So where Chicago was able to make their money was that rotation from P5 to P1 to P2. That's where this game was really lost if you're looking at this from the standpoint of a Seattle fan. But with that, if we're looking at the scoreboard here, essentially there was no standouts, right? It's just one team overall performed better than the other. Octane played better than Formal if you're talking about that AR matchup. But other than that, 26, 25, 25, 24 in terms of the SMG play from Chicago, whereas down below, Pander slacked. Apathy went 11 and 24. So there was a clear slaying discrepancy between the two teams. Nobody dropped 45, but as a team, they did a lot better. Chicago did a lot better than Seattle did. So with that, guys, if you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos every single day. The other thing that I'll point out is there's my Discord link down below in the chat. There are now 120 people inside my Discord that nightly are asking if people want to play 10s, if they want to team up for Warzone and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a place to meet other people and play 10s and learn the competitive game a little bit better, my Discord is down below, so make sure you check that out. Leave a like before you head on your way. And with that, guys, thank you so much. I will see you in tomorrow's upload.